They found his teeth before they found his name. The city had not yet woken, but the night's violence still lingered on the cracked pavement behind the old meatpacking plant. A silver sedan sat idling, its engine purring low as steam from the gutter curled around the tires. Rain fell hard, slicing the amber glow of streetlights into streaks across the windshield. Inside, blood traced lines down the knuckles of a man who would never forget this night. Michael Russo, age 34. Italian-American, former Army Ranger. Now the most feared contract killer in the Eastern Syndicate, stared into the rearview mirror with dead eyes. He remembered the call. A single ring, a woman's sharp breath, a coded word that meant death for someone. He did not ask questions. He never did. The job was betrayal, cold and clean. But tonight felt different. As thunder rolled, Michael stepped from the car and the world shrank to the sound of his boots on broken glass. Somewhere behind him, a body was already cooling. He never looked back, but his heart hammered as if every footstep could summon the ghost of the man he'd just silenced. A flash of lightning illuminated his reflection in a puddle. Blood on his face, gunmetal in his grip, rain turning crimson as it washed over his hands. A distant siren wailed, echoing the secret violence that would never be written in the morning paper. He walked on, vanishing into the shadows, carrying the memory of that final shattering scream. Before the first shot was fired, Michael Russo had lived a life sewn together by loyalty and violence. Born in the shadow of Little Italy's crumbling stoops, he learned early that trust was as brittle as old glass. His father, once a soldier for the local Don, vanished in a flurry of sirens when Michael was only 12. By 16, Michael was running errands for men whose names were only whispered behind closed doors. His hands learned the weight of money, and the sting of knuckles split against brick walls. Every lesson came with blood, sometimes his, sometimes theirs. Tonight, as the rain hammered the city and the night's brutality stuck to him like a second skin, he remembered the voice of his mother warning, "You'll drown if you chase ghosts, Mikey." He never listened. Michael became the ghost. He moved through the city's underbelly unseen, a weapon with no master, a man who took lives because he was told to. Yet every job left a scar. Each name etched on his conscience made him colder, harder. Now as dawn threatened the darkness, Michael understood that this was not just another contract. This was the beginning of his own reckoning, and there would be no turning back. Michael never dreamed of this life. As a child, he ran through alleys chasing after his father, believing the world was tough but fair. That illusion shattered the night his father disappeared, replaced by a silence that grew louder with every year. By 18, Michael had stopped believing in happy endings. He saw the city for what it was, a cage built from secrets and betrayals, where only the ruthless survived. He learned to move quietly, to strike first, and to bury his fear deep enough that it never showed on his face. Every corner turned was a risk. Every handshake was a test. Now, his reputation was a weapon sharper than any knife. People crossed the street when he passed, eyes lowered, voices hushed. He told himself it was the price of survival, but each new contract added another layer of ice around his heart. Tonight, he felt the weight of his past pressing against his ribs, each step into the rain, another reminder that ghosts are never far behind. The first rule of the streets was simple: never look back. Michael obeyed, but his memory betrayed him. Every darkened window might hide an enemy. Every step might echo with the ghosts of those he'd sent to the grave. He moved through the city like a rumor, invisible until it was too late. Sometimes he wondered if he was still a man, or just a shadow cast by the choices he'd made. Each night bled into the next, and only the faces changed. Tonight, the face belonged to someone who trusted him, someone who never saw the betrayal coming. Michael tried not to think about it, but regret clung to his bones like the rain on his skin. He told himself he didn't care. He lied. In the silence he replayed every moment, the whispered order, the shaking hands, the pleading eyes. He did what he was paid to do, but the price was steeper every time. Michael faded into the city's veins, the world swallowing him whole, as dawn crept along the skyline. Sirens shrieked in the distance, already too late. He blended with the shadows, every instinct tuned for survival. But inside, something shifted, a question he could not silence. How many more nights could he do this? How many more ghosts could he carry before his own soul dissolved? He moved with purpose, face set like stone, but the rain could not wash away the blood, and the darkness could not hide the truth. He was not the same man he'd been at midnight. This night marked him. And as he vanished into the labyrinth of alleyways, Michael Russo understood one thing. Death was no longer just a job. It was his legacy. Didn't know. Long before Michael Russo earned his name in blood, he was a boy chasing after his father's shadow down narrow, echoing halls. Every memory from those days was painted in sepia and fear. His mother's voice trembled as she tucked him in, eyes always fixed on the front door, listening for footsteps that might never come. At 14, he learned the sound of sirens was the closest thing to a lullaby their family ever knew. Michael never asked where his father went at night. He only saw the bruises, the envelopes stuffed with cash, and the way his mother's hands shook every Sunday morning. Now, years later, as rain thudded against a cracked window in his cramped apartment, Michael sat in silence, holding an old photograph. He remembered his father's promise. Family first. Always. Michael's hands were steady, but his heart battered against his ribs. He felt the loss deeper than he'd ever let anyone see. Tonight, the pain felt fresh, slicing through every hard layer he'd built. He whispered, "You left us, but I never left you." In the darkness, that promise was all he had left. The walls in Michael's world had always listened more than they spoke. Every corner held secrets, and every photo on the mantel told a story he wished he could rewrite. He gazed at the faded portrait of his parents on their wedding day. His mother's smile looked forced, his father's eyes glinted with ambition and something darker. Michael ran a thumb along the edge of the frame, remembering how he tried to become the man his father could never be. At school, he fought anyone who dared whisper about his family. On the streets he walked with fists clenched, trusting no one but his own resolve. Years of survival etched hard lines into his face, erasing whatever innocence had survived childhood. But behind every scar, there was still a boy who just wanted to be seen. Tonight, as thunder rattled the windows, Michael swore to himself, no more running. He would face his ghosts, even if it meant becoming one. Michael stepped out into the rain-soaked city, the cold biting through his thin jacket. He walked the old routes, streets lined with the memories of lost friends and vanished innocence. Each storefront whispered his past. Corners where he once traded punches, alleys where secrets died. Passing Tony's deli, Michael caught his own reflection in the window, older, harder, but searching for something he could not name. The city did not welcome men like him. It simply devoured them piece by piece. A little girl darted across the street, her laughter sharp against the storm, and Michael's chest tightened. For a heartbeat, he remembered being her, carefree, untouched by betrayal. But the world had different plans. He crossed the street, footsteps echoing in the quiet, and told himself he was beyond saving. But a sliver of hope fought through the darkness, refusing to die. The ghosts of Michael's past gathered around every corner, their voices tangled with the wind. At the edge of the old neighborhood, he paused by a crumbling playground, swings creaking in the storm. He remembered the last time he saw his father there, a man worn thin by loyalty and secrets. "We're all just trying to survive, Mikey," his father once said, ruffling his hair. But survival in this world meant sacrifice. Michael pressed his palm to the rusted metal, feeling cold and memory burn together. Regret pulsed through him, raw and unfiltered. He wondered what his father would say if he saw the man he had become. Would he be proud or horrified? Michael's jaw tightened. He couldn't go back. But maybe, if he survived one more night, he could find a way to change his ending. Michael's phone buzzed, shattering his reverie. He hesitated before answering, knowing every call could change the course of his life. A woman's voice, trembling, whispered through the static. "They're coming, Michael. You have to go." He recognized the fear. He'd heard it all his life. Michael's heart thundered, but his voice was calm. "Where are you?" The answer was a broken sob, then silence. He pocketed the phone, mind racing. The past had never let him go. Now, it was coming for him with a vengeance. He looked at the rain-washed street, the ghosts waiting just out of sight, and made a choice. Tonight he would fight, not just to survive, but to reclaim whatever was left of his soul. Michael Russo moved fast through rain-soaked streets, hunted by the shadows he once called brothers. The call had shattered the fragile calm, sending every nerve screaming. The syndicate's reach was everywhere. No alley too narrow, no hour too late. Michael's mind raced through names and faces, wondering who would sell him out first. He ducked into a shuttered bakery, the scent of old bread mingling with mildew. Glass crunched under his boots. Every sound was magnified. He pressed his back to the wall, breath ragged, hand gripping the cold steel in his jacket. "They know," he muttered, voice barely a whisper. Once, loyalty meant everything. Now it was a death sentence. Lightning flashed, illuminating a figure across the street. A familiar silhouette, friend or foe, he could not tell. Michael's heart pounded, sweat mixing with the rain on his brow. He remembered a time when the city felt like home, but now it was a trap. Tonight, he realized, trust was gone. All that remained was instinct and the loaded gun in his hand. A siren wailed somewhere close, its echo chasing Michael deeper into the bakery's darkness. He crouched behind a flour-dusted counter, ears straining for any sign of pursuit. The city outside pulsed with menace. Michael's thoughts spun with every betrayal. Old friends bought for cash, family ties broken with a single lie. The weight of his choices bore down heavy. He peered through a cracked pane, watching headlights crawl along the street. For a second, hope flickered that the car would pass. But the lights stopped, engine idling. Michael's pulse hammered. He remembered Frankie's warning. "In this business, you trust nobody, not even yourself." The door creaked open, footsteps slicing through silence. Michael gripped his weapon, ready to face whatever came through the dark. Tonight, he decided, he would not run. The hunter was becoming the hunted, and he would not go quietly. Footsteps echoed, slow and measured, as a figure moved closer. Michael's breath froze. A hand flicked the light switch, bulb fizzled to life, casting harsh light across the room. Salvatore, a syndicate enforcer, stepped into view. Tall, thick-set, rain dripping from his overcoat, gun held low. "You picked the wrong night to disappear, Mikey," Salvatore growled, voice gravel. Michael's lips curled in a cold smile. "Guess you drew the short straw, Sal." Tension snapped like a live wire. Years of friendship meant nothing now. Salvatore's finger tightened on the trigger. Michael's eyes darted to the side door. "You always talk too much," Michael said, shifting his stance. The room held its breath as the line between friend and killer vanished. It was survival now, nothing else. The silence shattered. Gunfire erupted, thunderous in the close quarters. Michael dove, glass exploding above his head, flour billowing in the air. Salvatore fired again, bullet tearing into a sack behind Michael's shoulder. Michael rolled, teeth gritted, squeezed off 2 shots. One clipped Salvatore's arm, sending him sprawling. "You always were quick, Mikey," Salvatore spat, blood slicking his sleeve. Michael stayed low, mind racing. Every lesson from the streets came rushing back. Never show mercy, never hesitate. He slid behind an upturned table, reloading. "It's over, Sal," he called, voice cold. But Salvatore only laughed, a bitter, broken sound. Michael braced himself. Tonight, only one would walk out alive. Blood stained the bakery floor, mixing with flour and rainwater. Michael stood over Salvatore, breath ragged, gun still smoking. Salvatore's eyes fluttered, pain and resignation mingling. "Wasn't supposed to end like this," Salvatore murmured, voice faint. Michael's jaw tightened, sorrow flashing in his eyes. We all made our choices, he said. The city outside felt impossibly far away. Sirens, thunder, the promise of dawn. Michael knelt, pressing 2 fingers to Salvatore's neck. The pulse faded, and with it, the last link to Michael's old life snapped. He stood, resolve settling in his bones. The war had truly begun. No more running, no more illusions. Michael wiped blood from his hands and walked into the storm, ready for whatever hell waited next. Michael's breath caught as the phone rang again, its shrill tone cutting through the silence of his hideout. He answered, expecting more threats or commands, but the voice was colder than ice. You think you're alone, Russo? Think again. The voice belonged to Lena, a woman he once trusted, someone who knew his past and secrets deeper than anyone else. His heart sank. Lena was the only family he had left, yet now, she was the snake in his garden. She spoke slowly, deliberately, each word a knife twisting in his gut. They're coming for you, and I'm the one who made the call. Michael's world shattered in an instant. The woman who swore loyalty had sold him out. The betrayal burned sharper than any bullet. His fists clenched, jaw tight. The devil had come not with fire or steel, but with a whisper, and everything he believed was a lie. Flashbacks flooded Michael's mind, Lena laughing beside him in better days, the plans they made, the promises whispered in dark corners. Now, every memory twisted with suspicion. He pictured her face in the dim light, the softness replaced by cold calculation. His voice broke the silence. Why, Lena? Why would you do this? Her answer was chilling, stripped of regret. Because I had to survive. Because you were going to destroy us all. The woman he loved had chosen survival over loyalty. Michael's pulse thundered as he realized the depth of the betrayal. The war was no longer just outside his door. It was inside his heart and mind. Lena was the devil he never saw coming, and now the hunt was on, for both of them. The city shifted beneath Michael's feet like quicksand. Trust was a currency too expensive to afford. He gathered his few remaining allies, faces grim, eyes shadowed by doubt. Plans were made in hushed tones, alliances re-examined. Michael stared across the room at Vito, his oldest friend, questioning if the man's silence meant guilt or fear. The line between friend and foe blurred until it was impossible to tell who would strike first. Every glance carried suspicion. Every whisper was a trap. Michael's voice cut through the tension. We're not just fighting bullets anymore, we're fighting ghosts, and the devil walks among us. The room tightened, breaths held, futures uncertain. The stakes had never been higher. This was no longer survival. It was war. Michael's eyes narrowed as he pored over a set of documents, a list of names, locations and times, a blueprint of betrayal mapped in ink. Lena's mark was clear. Every hit, every leak traced back to her hand. He clenched his fist so tightly the paper crumpled. She wasn't just a traitor, he muttered. She was a master of deception. The realization stung harder than any wound. The woman who once swore loyalty was a mastermind who had played them all. Michael's voice dropped to a grim whisper. The devil's not in the details, it's in the silence. Outside, rain hammered the roof as if echoing his resolve. The game had changed. It was no longer about killing enemies. It was about outsmarting the one who knew him best. As dawn approached, Michael stood on a rooftop overlooking the city he once called home. The rain had stopped, leaving streets slick and shining under the pale light. He lit a cigarette, smoke curling upward, the calm before the storm. His voice was low but steady. Betrayal cuts deeper than any bullet. But this isn't the end. Lena made her choice. Now I make mine. The city stretched before him, cold, indifferent, dangerous. Michael's eyes burned with new purpose. The devil had come for him, but he was ready to fight back. Tonight, the reckoning would begin. The story was no longer just about survival. It was about revenge, and nothing would stand in his way. Michael Russo stood in the dimly lit warehouse, every muscle coiled like a predator ready to strike. The scent of oil and rust mingled with the metallic tang of old blood, a stark reminder of the battles fought here before. His eyes locked on the figure emerging from the shadows. Lena. Her face was pale, but unyielding, eyes cold and calculating. "You betrayed me," Michael said, voice low but heavy with years of pain. Lena's lips curled in a bitter smile. "I did what I had to survive. And now you'll pay the price." The air thickened with tension, every second stretching impossibly long. Michael's hand moved slowly to his coat, fingers brushing the grip of his pistol. This was it. The final reckoning. No words left to say, no chances to take back what was lost. The room pulsed with silent menace. Their past, their love, their hatred, all converged here, in one charged moment where only one would walk away. The silence shattered with the snap of a gunshot, echoing off concrete walls like a death knell. Michael dove behind a steel crate, shards of wood splintering around him. Lena fired again, footsteps echoing as she advanced, her voice sharp and unrelenting. "You think you can stop this? You're just a ghost now, Russo." Michael's breath came hard as he reloaded, adrenaline sharpening every sense. He calculated, waited for the perfect moment to strike back. The dance of bullets and shadows played out in deadly rhythm, each shot a testament to their shattered past. Pain flared as a grazing bullet nicked his arm, but he pushed through. This was more than a fight for survival. It was the war for his soul. Neither would back down. Neither would forgive. Their battle spilled out onto the rain-slicked rooftops, city lights flickering like distant stars. Michael's coat whipped in the wind as he closed the distance, eyes blazing with fierce determination. Lena met him, breath ragged but defiant. "This ends now," Michael growled, grabbing her wrist and twisting it down. A knife flashed in her hand, cold steel meeting his flesh. Pain exploded, but Michael tightened his grip, fury eclipsing the sting. For a moment, time slowed. The city held its breath as two broken souls clashed on the edge of darkness. Michael whispered through gritted teeth, "You chose this path, Lena." Her eyes flickered with something like regret, then hardened. "So did you." The final act was upon them, and the night was their witness. A flash of movement, a sharp scream, then silence. Michael stood over Lena's collapsed form, rain mingling with blood streaking his hands. The fight had ended, but the cost was carved deep into his soul. He knelt beside her, voice trembling as he said, "It didn't have to be this way." Lena's eyes fluttered open, pain and acceptance mingling. "You were never just a killer to me, Mikey," she whispered. "You were my family." Tears mixed with rain as Michael closed his eyes, the weight of loss pressing down like the cold night. The city held its breath. The war was over, but the wounds would never heal. Michael rose, the shadows swallowing him once more, carrying the memory of love and betrayal in equal measure. As dawn broke, Michael stood alone at the edge of the rooftop, the city awakening beneath him. The rain had stopped, leaving the world washed clean but scarred. His breath rose in mist, eyes fixed on the horizon where shadows met light. The final bullet had been fired, the debts had been paid. But victory was hollow. He was a man broken by blood and loss. The ghost of Lena lingered in his thoughts, a reminder that some wars never truly end. Michael turned away, the weight of his choices heavy but unyielding. "I am not finished," he vowed. "This story is mine to write." The city hummed below, indifferent and eternal. And Michael Russo walked forward, into the unknown, carrying the price of revenge etched into every step. The morning after the storm, Michael Russo sat alone in a dimly lit motel room, rain still tapping gently on the window. His face bore the fatigue of countless sleepless nights, eyes hollow but alert. The city's hum was distant, replaced by the suffocating silence of solitude. Michael traced the outline of a worn photograph in his hand, remnants of a life lost to violence and betrayal. He thought about the friends who had fallen, the family torn apart, and the enemy within who had shattered his trust. He whispered, "There's no forgiveness for ghosts." Outside, the sun struggled to pierce the clouds, a weak light for a man who had seen too much darkness. He knew the price of silence was steep, and he had paid it in full. But the story wasn't over. The city had its claws in him, and he was still trapped in its merciless grip. Michael's phone vibrated on the cracked nightstand, pulling him from the fog of exhaustion. The caller ID was unknown, but he answered anyway. Old habits die hard. A voice whispered warnings and rumors of new threats, of men rising to fill the vacuum left behind. Michael clenched his jaw, knowing the cycle would never end. The underworld was a serpent eating its own tail, and he was trapped in its coils. "They think the story's over," he muttered. "But it's just a new chapter." He stood, pulling on his coat with deliberate slowness, his eyes steeling against the coming storm. The city was waiting. So was the silence, and its deadly price. Days blurred into nights as Michael moved like a ghost through the city's underbelly, every step calculated, every breath measured. His world had shrunk to shadows and whispered threats. The allies he once trusted had either vanished or turned against him. His only certainty was the cold steel in his pocket and the hunger for redemption that no bullet could kill. Michael's mind raced through memories of fallen friends, the faces of those he could never save. He whispered to the night, "I am not the man I was." His reflection in a broken mirror showed a stranger, scarred, hardened, and unyielding. The city didn't forgive, and neither would he. This was his penance, his exile, and he would carry it alone, for as long as it took. Michael found himself standing at the edge of a bridge, overlooking the river's cold, relentless flow. The city's skyline blurred through the morning mist. He clenched a worn silver coin, the last gift from his father, a reminder of promises and bloodlines. The weight of the past pressed heavy against his chest. "There's no retirement plan for ghosts," he murmured, voice barely carrying over the rushing water. He knew that no matter what battles he won or lost, the silence would always follow. The price was paid in solitude and shadows. He tossed the coin into the river and watched it sink, a symbol of endings and beginnings. Michael turned away from the water, his path still uncertain, but his resolve unbroken. The war inside him raged on. Night fell again, wrapping the city in a velvet cloak of secrets. Michael sat in a shadowed bar, eyes scanning faces, every moment a risk. He raised a glass to the ghosts that haunted him, the friends lost, the betrayals endured, the love that died in silence. He was no longer just a man, he was a legend whispered in fear and respect. His journey had carved a path of blood and silence that few dared to follow. And though the city never slept, Michael found a strange kind of peace in the endless night. The price had been paid, the silence earned. But the story, that was his alone to tell. Michael Russo's footsteps echoed on the empty street, the city a silent witness to a man shaped by violence and betrayal. Every shadow held a memory, every breath a reminder that peace was a myth for those like him. The cold wind bit through his coat, carrying whispers of past sins and lost souls. He paused beneath a flickering street lamp, eyes scanning the dark horizon. Somewhere a distant siren wailed, an unending call to chaos. Michael's voice was low, almost a whisper. "There's no redemption for ghosts, only silence." His silhouette blurred in the night, a figure caught between worlds. The city had taken everything, but it had never taken his will. Tonight, the echo of his story would linger long after he disappeared. Memories surged like a tide, faces of those who had fallen, promises broken, and a love that slipped through his fingers like smoke. Michael's heart was a battlefield, scarred and raw. He stopped at a forgotten park bench, hands clenched in pockets, fighting the urge to collapse beneath the weight of his choices. But he stood firm. The night was long, and his journey was far from over. "I carry their silence," he said, voice steady but haunted. "Their stories live in me." The city breathed around him, indifferent yet alive, a living graveyard of secrets. Michael was a ghost among ghosts, a man both hunted and hunter, forever caught in the shadows of his own making. The city's pulse slowed as dawn crept forward, pale light brushing skyscrapers and streets alike. Michael's figure was framed against the awakening skyline, a silhouette carved from pain and resolve. He lit a cigarette, the glow briefly illuminating his weathered face, eyes distant yet unyielding. He exhaled, smoke swirling like ghosts in the cold morning air. "This is the legacy I leave," he murmured, "not of glory, but of silence." The sun climbed higher, promising a new day, but for Michael the past was a shadow that would never fade. His story was etched in the alleys, the gunmetal, the blood, an endless echo reverberating through time and space. A final whisper escaped Michael's lips as he turned away from the rising sun, footsteps fading into the city's endless maze. "I am the story they won't tell," he said softly. "The silence they fear." His voice dissolved into the morning breeze, carried through empty streets and forgotten corners. The ghosts he had chased, and the ones that chased him, would remain, but Michael was no longer among them. He had become legend, myth, and warning. The city's heartbeat continued, unaware, uncaring. But those who knew whispered his name in fear and respect. And somewhere in the dark his story lived on, unseen, unheard, but never forgotten. "There's no retirement plan for ghosts," Michael's voice echoed in the silence like a warning etched in stone. The city's lights dimmed, the night closed its curtain, and the story faded, only to begin anew in whispered legends and shattered lives. Michael Russo was gone, but his echo remained, a cold truth, a silent revenge that would haunt the streets forever. And in the quiet darkness, that final line whispered louder than any gunshot, haunting every corner where shadows dared to linger. The story was over. Or perhaps it had only just begun.